Hi guys, I'm Kasha. Welcome to our coffee times to talk about horror. And today I bring you a reading wrap up. It seems like it's been forever since I did one of these because I waited with the month of July because I didn't read so much. So this is a wrap up for the month of July plus August. So there's going to be a lot of summer horror books in this list. And this is also a total of 11 books, so I didn't read that much between the 2 months. Some of them, were better than others, but we're here today to talk about what I thought about the books. So without further ado, let's take a look at the 11 books that I managed to read between July and August.
It's coffee time!
First we have The Last Way by Cameron L. Mitchell, and this is a horror novella. So this is a horror novella that I picked because I thought the premise was very interesting. You are basically reading the thoughts of a young boy that is kind of coming up with ideas or ways that he could kill his dad. It sounded quite disturbing, just reading the thoughts of somebody plotting their own father's death and how to kill him. So I kind of picked it because of that, and I thought it would be an interesting novella. But I realized that I was losing interest in the novella because all the chapters kind of blended in together. I think that happens because every chapter kind of is a little bit the same structure in a way, because every chapter is kind of like a way that he's thinking he could potentially kill his father. So the fantasies that he has and the dreams he has of how he would do it, they are quite disturbing, and bloody and all of that. And it's interesting to see the different ways that he would come up with to kill his own father. Many people really enjoyed this novella. I think I'm kind of in the minority here. I just couldn't really connect with the main character, so that might have been one of the main reasons why. I don't mean it in a way that he was unreliable or a great character, because I do like those. It was something about him as a character that I think it just didn't click with me. I don't know if it was just a writing style, but somehow this one just didn't do it for me. Then I listened to a nonfiction audiobook called Cultish: The Language of Fanaticism by Amanda Montell. And when I went into this book, I guess I had different expectations of what I was going to get, and even though the first half of the book was very interesting for me, I felt like I couldn't care so much for the second half, to be honest. The book does a good job at describing the different types of cults that exist and why people are attracted to them, what kind of language is used in order to attract and keep people in the cult. It starts talking about, Jonestown and Heaven's Gate, which are more kind of like true crime cults, and that's exactly my vibe, and I think that's why I enjoy the beginning a lot more, because those are cults that I find fascinating because they're a lot more extreme than the cults that the author discusses in the second half. Like, what drives a person to kill themselves for a religion, for a cult, for a belief, that is fascinating to me. Then the book starts to focus on Scientology and MLMs, which was still interesting to me, honestly, because I wanted to know a little bit more about Scientology and all of that, because I'm not too into it, but I'm curious about how it works. I just haven't really watched documentaries or anything about it as I do with true crime. But then it started to talk after that about fitness gurus and influencers and CrossFit, and that's, I think, when the book really lost me, because I didn't find it as interesting. Like, I understand why some of these things can be cultish, but I just didn't find it as exciting. I was particularly interested to hear how language and the way that you talk, the words that you use, can drive people to join a cult. And I kind of wish that the book would have focused a lot more on that based on the title of the book. I was expecting a lot more discussion about the language, that the companies or the individuals use in order to get people hooked into these cults. I listened to it in audiobook, so it's easy for me to get through the second half, even though it was not interesting for me. I would listen to it, less often, I would say, in the second half, because I just wanted to finish it, but I was not so intrigued anymore. But keep in mind, if you want a book that analyzes and explores the language of cults in detail, the title and the description of the book might be a little bit misleading, because I didn't feel like it was so much focus on that. Next we have 8114 by Joshua Hall, and this is a horror mystery. Paul decides to return home after he hears of the passing of a good friend, and he also has a podcast, so he decides to put that to use. And while he's back in his hometown, he wants to do interviews with people he used to know when he was younger, and also kind of cover a little bit the death of his friend. And while he's kind of investigating, talking to people, he discovered more than that. He actually came across an urban legend from his hometown, and the part of the urban legend was really interesting to me because it was such a dark and twisted urban legend that I really enjoyed to learn about it. He decided to talk about this urban legend in his podcast episodes, and that didn't go very well for him. I think he just poked the bear a little bit too much. It was kind of like a different take on urban legends, and I did appreciate that there was a podcast, kind of bring a little bit of mixed media into the book. For being a debut novel, I think it was very well constructed. I think that there were a lot of little creepy moments that are probably gonna spook some readers. My biggest problem with the book, I think, is that it was very convoluted. I think the author was trying to put in this book so much, and it ended up being not exactly confusing, but I think he was just juggling too many things at the same time. Some parts of the book are really hard to believe as well, even though I know it's fiction, okay? But some parts were a little bit hard to believe. And overall, I like the urban legend thing that we had, and also the small town mystery vibe. So the book did have a lot of good things going on for it. I have the feeling sometimes that authors, when they have to publish a debut novel, they have all of these ideas that they have been accumulating, or all of these things that come to their minds, and they want to put everything in one single book. And I think sometimes it gets a little bit, too complex. It gets a little bit too busy. Then we're going to talk about one of the books that I read because it was a summer slasher, and it was called Summer Camp for Slasher Victims by Matthew Mercer. We are in Camp Safe Woods, and as the title implies, this is supposed to be a camp that it is a safe space, because this summer camp is designed for people that have survived a massacre. So for victims, for survivors, people that have trauma of what happened to them. So they come to this camp, they talk about their experiences, they talk to each other, meet people, that have had similar experiences in life, and that's how they can kind of move on from that trauma. Unfortunately, this year the camp is not going to be so safe. It's going to be more of a killing spree for a killer that we don't know who it is, but we will have to figure out. I think for this being a slasher book, my biggest problem with it was that it was very, very slow. It was a very slow burn, and that kind of takes away tension and takes away some of the fun and the action that I expect on a slasher. I'm also not expecting somebody to die in every chapter, even though it would be cool. But I think for slashers, I just expect some action somewhere in the beginning already to kind of kickstart that. A lot of slasher movies have a first kill opening scene, you know what I mean? And that kind of sets the tone for what's to come. And then you're already on edge because you already know people are gonna die for real. And here it just takes so long to get to the part where people start dying that I think for me it was just dragging a little bit too much on that part. But I did enjoy the nostalgia, the 80s vibes. I did enjoy all the reference to horror movies and stereotypes and things like that. I did enjoy to meet the characters, and learn their past, what kind of massacre they survived in order to get to the camp. But like I said, I feel like because the kills started so late, I was not even excited as much anymore because we were already at the end of the book. So I was like, okay, let's just finish the book. And that is not a good feeling to have. Don't get me wrong, it's an entertaining book. I finished it, but I just was expecting kind of a faster pace, a little bit more action, a little bit something extra, and it was just not there for me. Sometimes it's not a bad idea to just build up something really cool and then have a very explosive third act or ending. I just don't think that benefited the story in particular. Then I listened to another nonfiction book, this time a book that it is about horror movies, and it is called The Black Guy Dies First, Black Horror Cinema from Father to Oscar, and it is by Robin R. Means Coleman and Mark H. Harris. And I was really excited to read this one because you guys know I love horror, but I really love not just books but also movies a lot. I've watched so many horror movies, so I just wanted to educate myself a little bit on, you know, the Black characters throughout cinema history. And this does exactly that. It goes back to the beginning of cinema and it starts to explore the roles that, you know, Black people have been offered to play in movies, and in this case, of course, specifically horror movies. And that was such an interesting thing for me to hear about, especially the very beginnings, the roots where it came from, the spooks and everything that I was not, I mean, it's not like I was ignorant about, but I didn't know as much as I know now. And I think this book really does a good job to establish kind of like a baseline. A baseline of like knowledge, like the bare minimum that you need to understand where everything started to get to where we are today. It goes from the very beginning where Black people were not even really offered roles in horror movies. Then the roles that they got were like very small and basically the Black guy dies first kind of stereotype. And then it kind of tells you, you know, everything that happened to get to the point where you got movies like Get Out by Jordan Peele. The audiobook was great. I think the narrator did a good job, and I love to hear stories about the older movies, some of them which are so obscure that I had never even heard of before, because they're really like not B, like C and D movies, like movies I've never heard of before, to listen to stories of newer movies or movies that I have seen clearly. And it was really exciting to hear all of the stories because some of them also involve the actors or things from set, so that was fun to listen to. The only thing I would say is that if you decide to consume this book in audiobook like I did, keep in mind that there are many lists in this book. So sometimes the audiobook would just go through a list of movies, you know, name of the movie and year, and it would just go on and on and on. And especially if you want to take notes or if you want to highlight things, if you don't have the book, if you're just listening to the audiobook, you might miss on that. So just keep that in mind, that there are several times in the book where there is a big list of movies that are just going to be, you know, listed. The next book is another summer slasher that was on my list for some time and I wanted to read, and that is Camp 1985. It is by Matthew R. Core and is part of a book series called Slasherverse. And this one I did enjoy a little bit more than the other one, so let's talk about it. Welcome to Camp 1985. And this camp gets its name because it is a camp designed for parents to send their kids that are addicted to social media to kind of detox, right? They're being sent there because they want them to be without internet, without phones, nothing like that. So the thing is, the kids don't really volunteer to go there. The parents just drop them there and be like, bye, see ya. They take their phone, so they don't even have phones in the premises of the camp. The only thing that they have is an old landline, and that is it. That's all the type of communication that they have with the outside world. And also the kids that are being sent there are kids that have their own social media platforms, that are YouTubers or, you know, TikTokers or whatever, and some of them even know each other from social media. So it's fun to see the different types of characters that come to this camp in particular, and it feels very modern in that regard. So you have like the modern part of social media addicted kids that don't know how to do things without that or without Googling everything every 5 minutes, and you have a camp that gives them absolutely no technology, so they have to adapt and survive and not get bored without their phones. It's good to know that the only thing that they have to communicate with the outside world is an old landline, because what happens if a killer starts to kill the kids, which it is what happens here as well. Our main character is a boy named Ander, and I really liked him as a character. I think you really grow fond of him as a character, and he's the one that gets the most kind of in-depth character exploration. Kind of found myself really rooting for him, but all the characters are really fun because they are basically being tortured here because they cannot post anything in social media, they cannot record a TikTok, and that's also very fun to see as somebody that I am from an older generation, so I'm not as addicted to these things as younger generations are. So it's also fun to see for me. This is a supernatural slasher, I would say, with tons of nostalgia. I think it was a lot of fun to read for the summer, and in this one you can feel more of a tension building, you can feel more the fear, the killer, like from the very beginning, which I think gives it more of a proper slasher vibe, which is what I was missing with the other one. It even had funny moments because, like I said, we're dealing with teenagers that don't know how to survive without technology, so when they have a killer coming for them, they have to get creative. They have to figure out how to do things without their phones because they cannot really call for help like that. I would definitely recommend this one to people that like slashers, like summer slashers, and I think it's a lot of fun, fast-paced to read during the summer. Then I read Bad Dolls by Rachel Harrison, which are 4 short horror stories by Rachel Harrison. They're very different and I enjoy them all for different reasons. You guys know Rachel Harrison, one of my new favorites, so obviously I wanted to read her short story collection because all I have read so far have been full-length novels. Even though I really enjoy these 4 stories, I think I enjoy more her writing in a full-length novel because I think one of her stronger suits is to create these characters that feel so alive, so unique, so powerful. And I think, you know, when you have a short story, she still develops amazing characters, but you have less time to really go in depth into the character creation and development. And for me, I think that's why I prefer her longer novels. I don't think I could pick a favorite story. I think they were all kind of disturbing in their own way. And these are stories that the endings are interesting. That's what I would say about it. All of them. And they were very, very different from each other as well. And I definitely recommend it for people that want to get a little bit of a taste of what Rachel Harrison has to offer. Because I do feel like there's a lot of elements from her novels that are seen in these short horror stories, but I will still prefer a full-length novel. So I still have a couple to catch up with from her. I think I have 3 now that I still have not read, so I still have some to devour because I just love her writing. All the stories are also related to like real life situations, so I think that's also something that makes them a lot more terrifying. They also carry some social commentary, which again, it's something that you can expect from Rachel Harrison, so that's why I think this is a good introduction if you just want to read something short before you commit to a full-length novel. Then we have Monsters by Emerald Fennell, and I don't know what to tell you, but Goodreads says this is YA horror. It's quite intense if this is really truly YA. Just gonna say that. Just because the main characters are teenagers, I don't know if you could qualify this as YA. The main characters are 12 years old, but this is from the same woman that did Saltburn, which is a movie that I really, really enjoyed. I watched that movie like 3 times already, and it's a very disturbing, very unique movie. Just putting it out there. It's gonna make you feel very uncomfortable, and I think that's kind of her formula. This book was uncomfortable, it was awkward at times, it was disturbing, it had some things that I kind of wish I was not reading about. So I would check the content warnings, okay? If you're gonna read it and you are a young adult, specifically, because there are some things here that I wouldn't really classify as YA. So just keep that in mind. This is set in a seaside town, and it is about a young girl. She's 12 years old, and every summer she goes to spend there some time at a family's hotel, and she despises it every single time. However, this summer is a little bit different because she is obsessed with true crime, and the bodies of murdered women are starting to appear afloat at the coast. And she's very interested in this investigation. She wants to see the corpses when they're being pulled out of the water. She wants to know who it is. She wants to figure out who is killing these women and why. So together with a boy that she just met called Miles, they want to find this serial killer. Miles is staying at the hotel, so they kind of buddy up. They end up being friends, and they develop their own kind of almost like a murder board, you know, where they're trying to figure out who could potentially be the serial killer in this town, who has a reason, motive, you know, opportunity, all of that. So that was a fun part. However, the relationship between the two is very weird. It's very toxic, disturbing. Like, there is nothing in this book that is uplifting or light, or I don't know. It's just very, very dark and very, very disturbing. Okay, so just keep that in mind, because it might feel like, oh, two 12-year-old kids investigating murder, fun. No, it's very dark and twisted. This was a dark humor mystery thriller kind of vibe, and it was told from the POV of the girl, and her point of view is also very interesting because it's a POV that I would say is very confrontational. It's very out there. I don't know if everybody's gonna enjoy reading from her voice, from her perspective, because it's not your typical 12-year-old. Sometimes she says things that you're like, Jesus Christ. It catches you off guard, and that's why I say I don't particularly think this is YA. I mean, at its core, it seems to be a cozy murder mystery where two 12-year-olds are trying to find a killer because the police is clueless. Get that? And they are also in this hotel, so interesting people leave and come and go from the hotel. But it is a lot more disturbing than just that. Honestly, these two 12-year-olds, the relationship they have between them and with other adults is a lot more disturbing than the serial killer and the murders. I would say the serial killer and the murders, that's like the lightest part of the book. I don't think everybody's going to love this book. I don't think so. As same as I think that people are not gonna love the director's movies. It's for a very specific type of people that enjoy that. I seem to be one of them. Think about it what you may. But I did enjoy both director's movies that I've seen, and I did enjoy her book. You know, all things considered, I like things that are really dark and twisted and disturbing and that make it uncomfortable for me. Things that I don't expect. I didn't expect this 12-year-old to sound like she does or do the things that she does, but then you learn things about her and you're like, no wonder she's fucked up. So, you know, it worked for me. But like I said, keep in mind this is not a really cozy murder mystery for teens, okay? Okay. I think I warned you enough. Then I read The Phoeba Experiments by M.J. Mars, and this is a horror. I think it's novella because I think it's under 200 pages, but this one was very, very good. Our main character, Nala, loves to create YouTube videos specifically about true crime and unsolved cases and all of that, which I'm already here for. And she decides to talk about this experiment that was performed back in the 2000s. And it was an experiment where they would invite teenagers to participate in a kind of like a sleep study. However, they all died except one person. And she's very, very interested about this case. You know, they were called the Phoeba Experiments, hence the title of the novella. And she also discovers that the one person that survived those experiments back in 2000 is one of her teachers. So now she's even more interested to cover the case in her YouTube channel. On top of that, the same company is kind of doing another round of experiments also based on sleep, and she wants to know, why did the people die? What is now with the new experiments? Why was my teacher the only survivor? So a lot of questions, you know, that she has to answer. This was a very interesting story about the potential that you can kind of uncover, the potential that is behind your own eyes, the power of the human eyes and what is behind it. It was a story with great characters. It had fast pacing. It was very unnerving. It was full of tension. Some of the scenes where you see how the participants died are quite gruesome and graphic, quite gory, so I did enjoy those as well. The book will keep you at the edge of your seat because you really want to know what's going on and what is with this company and why did the experiments go so wrong. And even though For some characters, I kind of wish I would have had more time to get to know them and explore their background a little bit more. I understand this is supposed to be a fast-paced book. It's supposed to be a short book, so you don't have time for everything. But it's one of those books where you kind of wish you had more pages because it was just that good. Also, because it's not as long, it does leave some questions open, which is something that some readers might not enjoy, but I definitely encourage people to pick this one up if you're looking for a quick read, because I really enjoyed it. It really surprised me. I didn't expect to enjoy this one so much, but I did. So this is great, especially also if you like studies about experiments, you know, and people that are being tested, because this kind of like sleep experiment that they do, it begins like something that potentially is harmless, but the way that it ends for a lot of these characters, Lord have mercy, because it can get really gory. The poor people that die in this book, let's say that they did not have a peaceful die in your sleep way out. Then of course I read Not Quite Dead Yet by Holly Jackson, and this is her debut as an adult writer, right? This is her adult mystery thriller debut, and I was really intrigued to see how she was going to handle it, you know? And to be honest, it still feels like Holly Jackson. I didn't see like a huge jump or difference. Of course, the characters are a little bit older. The things that they say or they do are more adult, you know? She can do things or say things that she cannot really do with YA, even though she has pushed some boundaries when it comes to YA writing. But this was another win for me. I really enjoyed it. Here we have Jed. She is the daughter of a wealthy family, so she has never really had to worry about much. And she's also not in a hurry to decide what she's going to do with her life, what she's going to work. She's just thinks, you know, she has time to think these things over, no stress, so she's just enjoying life at the moment. However, after a Halloween party, she goes back home and somebody hits her really hard in the head, leaving her injured. She wakes up at the hospital thinking, oh, okay, I'm alive, I'm at the hospital, somebody hit me, but I'm fine. But the doctors give her the not so good news, and that is that she has suffered a really heavy struck in her head, and that has left her basically dying. Because of the injuries that she has suffered in her brain, the doctors know that she has about 1 week to live. The only solution is to go through a surgery that also gives her barely no chances of survival, but at least they could try. However, Jed is like, you know what? I'm not gonna do it. I'm not gonna do a surgery because I have 7 days left and this is the only thing I can control in my life right now. And I want to spend those 7 days trying to figure out who killed me, because obviously she knows she's gonna die. So the person that hit her is considered a murderer in this case. So against the family wishes, Jed decides not to get the surgery and just start an investigation to try to figure out who attacked her. And this is a very emotional book in a way for a lot of people, because obviously you relate to the main character, you want her to find her killer, and you know that by the end of the book she's most likely going to die because, you know, that's what they're telling you already from the very beginning. That's kind of like the pitch of the book, right? A girl that is going to die in 7 days, so she has 7 days to find her killer. So obviously you're rooting for Jed. You want her to find this killer and at least find peace before she goes. And she's a very interesting character, Jed. She's very charismatic, but she's also very chaotic, and I think not everybody is going to maybe like her as a main character because she's not your typical likable main character. She also makes decisions sometimes that you might not agree with, and I don't know if it's out of desperation or out of frustration, because obviously the police are not really helping as usual. And when a person is so desperate, sometimes they don't make the best decisions or they don't say nice things sometimes. So in a way, it is very true to her situation, I would say. Probably the character that I loved the most in this book was Billy. He was a trooper. Billy Forever. I really liked that guy. In general, the book had a really good pacing, especially at the beginning. I was really like looking forward to pick the book up over and over again. That urge to pick up the book kind of decreased towards the ending, but I have to say that I did enjoy the story of Jed kind of really risking everything, doing everything she can to find her killer. Like, you can really feel her determination through the pages. Like, she is determined, nothing can stop her, she needs to figure it out. Like, when you have like a week left to live, you probably, if you're a normal person, maybe you would choose to travel or to spend time with your loved ones or do things that you enjoy. Watch that movie that is your favorite because it's going to be the last time. I don't know, but Jed is like, no, screw all of that. I'm just going to spend the last 7 days just trying to figure out who killed me, and I don't care about family or doing my favorite things. That's just out of the question. The story has, of course, a couple of twists and turns in the story, as you would also know from other Hallie Jackson books. I think it's normal, she always has more than one twist, so that keeps also the reader kind of entertained because you're always getting like a little bit of a twist, but you're not getting like the full like end twist yet. I think this probably has been Hallie's most ambitious work to date, and I think she did a really good job with the book and the mystery. I think she does a good job, you know, establishing characters and give us clues without revealing too much. I wouldn't say it's my favorite by her, but I did enjoy it more, this one, than the reappearance of Rachel Price. So, you know, keep that in mind. I have read so far now all of her books, and I have enjoyed them all for different reasons, but I still think this is a good mystery thriller to pick up. And now let's talk about my favorite book that I read between July and August, and that is How Bad Things Can Get by Darcy Coates, and this is her newest horror thriller. And I find myself enjoying her horror thrillers more than her horror kind of haunted stories. And this one was so good. It was very bloody and gory, and I loved the mystery of it all. And it was fantastic. It's also great for summer because it does take place on an island. So let's talk about it. And let me tell you, with this one, Darcy Coates was like, do you want to read about really messed up deaths? I got you. So get ready for that. They were going to celebrate and have the party of their lives during a whole week because an influencer has invited hundreds of his followers to his newly bought private island, and he wants to, you know, inaugurate this island by inviting some of his best subscribers, followers, you know, invite them all to the island where they're just gonna have games and party and good food for a whole week. The island is called Prosperity Island, and it was supposed to be the party of their lives. However, for some of them, or all of them, we don't know yet, it might be their end. It might be where they bite the dust. The island has some dark history that maybe not everybody knows about before they go there, and that is that the island used to belong to a cult, and the cult that lived in the island one day decided to commit suicide, and everybody died except one little girl that survived and was rescued from the island. This novel was fantastic when it comes to the pacing of the book. It was, from the get-go, super interesting. It was filled with tension. I was unable to put this book down. I wanted to keep reading because I was so invested with the story, with the characters. I wanted to learn more about this place, and the way that Darcy Coates started to introduce the characters was so smart, because sometimes when you have a lot of different characters in a book, it can be really easy to get them confused. You know, the reader gets them confused a lot. But Darcy gives you a character, and it gives you exactly enough time for you to really connect and understand that character before she moves to a different POV. And it was so easy for me to tell them apart, you know, even though when we had like 5 and 6 characters and going up, like I could still tell them apart super easily. And that is not as easy to do as you would think, because some writers, when they start writing different POVs, everything is just the same in my brain and I am unable to tell them apart. For Darcy Coates, she's a master when it comes to that. The mystery of the island, the cult that used to live there, the games that the people in the island are playing that are starting to turn a little bit deadly, not gonna lie. Everything made this book so entertaining. I'm telling you, this is one of the best by Darcy Coates. The kills were brutal, like ruthless. Like, I was like, Darcy, girl, damn, hot damn. This is for me definitely up there together with Dead of Winter. Those are my 2 favorite books by Darcy Coates, and maybe Dead of Winter is a little bit higher than this one, but they're kind of like touching each other on my ranking. Imagine people are isolated, they are trapped in an island, they don't know what's going on, they have nowhere to go for help, they are starting to be murdered. They don't know if they can make it out alive at all because nobody's gonna come to pick them up to that island until 7 days have passed. Reception is not the best either. So lovely. It's a book that I would recommend you, especially if you don't suffer from anxiety, because there were a lot of passages from the book where it gave me anxiety to see the characters suffering, and the tension is just, oh, you can just cut it with scissors. Like, it is so good. And again, this is a book that I would recommend for summer because of the vibe, you know, the summer island and the partying and all of that. But if you don't mind to read this type of books during September, you know, or the winter season, be my guest, because it's a really good book. So I'm really glad that I read it, especially that I read it during summer, because it was just so good. It's another one of my favorites by Darcy Coates so far. Also, somebody that really enjoys stories about cults, I really love to hear about that specific backstory and history of the island as well. So if you're somebody that loves cults, this is a book that you must read. Unless you cannot take really extreme, brutal, gory deaths, because there's a few in this book, which for me, I loved it, but I understand why they might be a little bit extreme for some readers. Alright, you guys, so those were the 11 books that I managed to read during the month of July and August. I hope that you enjoyed these wrap up. Let me know what is the best book that you read this summer, and also let me know if you particularly only read this type of books during summer, or if you don't mind reading about summer camps in the middle of winter. Let me know if that's something that bothers you or not as a reader. I think for me, I do tend to keep them seasonal somehow in my brain. I think it just makes more sense, but I know some people don't mind. So let me know down below, what is your point of view? What is your position in that? Let's talk about it in the comments. Thank you guys as always so much for watching, and I hope to see you all in the next coffee time. Bye!